Hey guys, welcome back to First Kids. If you're viewing this when it's first premiered, just probably Saturday about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right now, it's actually right here right now is Wednesday. And I've been in Little Rock all day and I've just got back and ready for a great lesson. I keep saying this every week, but all of the miracles are just like really good, but this one, man, there are so many applications that we could, in so many different directions we could go with this story. But I've got one picked out in particular that I think is really good for you. So we're studying Jesus as a miracle worker. And our big picture question is, why miracles? Well, we find out that there's 3 reasons why Jesus did miracles. One was to glorify God. The second was to show that he was the Son of God. And today's lesson brings that out really, really well. And the third was that he cared for people. And we seen that last week where he had compassion on the crowd and fed them lunch, or supper, or whatever time frame it was, from 5 loaves and 2 fish. Well, today we're going to be talking about Jesus walking on water. So immediately after, this story takes place immediately after the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus tells his disciples, he said, hey, y'all get in a boat, go over to the other side, and I'll meet you over there, and I'll send the crowd away. So they get in a boat, and they start toward the other side. Jesus sends the crowd away, and Jesus then goes up into a mountain to pray. And so we're going to read from Matthew chapter 14, and we're going to start in verse 22. Now, I'm having a hard time focusing today on things, so if I stutter a little bit reading, y'all hang with me there. But Matthew chapter 14, starting at verse 22. And it says, immediately he made the disciples get into a boat and go ahead of him to the other side, while he sent the crowds away. And after he had sent the crowds away, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from the land, and battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. Wind was blowing against them. They're trying to go into the wind. And when the 4th watch of the night, he came to them, walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, it's a ghost. And they cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, take courage, it is I, do not be afraid. Peter said to him, Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water. And he said, come. And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became frightened, and he began to sink. And he cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus stretched out his hand, and he took hold of him and said to him, you of little faith, why did you doubt? And when they had got into the boat, the wind stopped. And those that were in the boat worshipped him, saying, here you go, catch this, you are certainly God's Son. So the purpose of the miracle we see here, we said that one of those purposes was to show that he was God's Son. We see that thought, that process happened, and the disciples got it. They said, you're God's Son. And, it's a great story. And one of the things I want to look at today is Peter in the story. Everybody always comes to Peter, and I'm no different. Jesus performed that miracle. He stopped the wind. The sea got calm. And everything was okay. But Jesus started out and he's walking on the water, and they see Jesus and they think he's a ghost and they're scared. And he says, hey, it's me. And Peter says, well, if it's you, bid me to come to you. And here's where we see something to me that's just really amazing. So Peter takes a leap of faith, or a step of faith. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know how many of you have ever tried to walk on water. Okay? I've been at the lake before and see how far I can run into the water, but I don't stay on top of the water. That's just not what you do. That's just an unnatural law. Brody, if you're watching this, can you just imagine this? If we're out fishing a pond, this would be so cool. We're out fishing a pond, and here's a top, and we just can't get that right angle in there to run that spinnerbait by that log or something. If we could walk on water, we'd just walk out into the pond, get the angle lined up, and boom, throw out there and just bring it right down side that log. But we can't do that. But through God, Peter was able to walk on water. I mean, he got out of a boat in a storm, and he's going toward Jesus, and he's walking on the water. He is defying the natural law. He's doing things that are impossible because his focus is on Jesus. You see, we can do impossible things when our focus is on Jesus, and it's not because we're doing them, it's because who's doing them? It's because God's doing them. Just like Jesus was the one that was making it where Peter could walk on water, he enables us to do things that are supernatural when we follow him. But Peter, he's human just like you and I. He's out there, and all of a sudden he looks around and he says, this ain't supposed to happen. What's going on here? And he begins to sink. So one of the things that you could look at is that, well, he took his eyes off Jesus. Yeah, that's one of the points of the story. You can look at it that he had faith. Yeah, that's one of the points of the story. You could look at it and say, well, none of the other ones had faith. Yeah, that's the point of the story. But here's the point of the story that really, really comes home to me. It said that Peter got out of the boat and started toward Jesus. Now, Jesus was far enough off that they couldn't really recognize him. So he was not just really, really close. And Peter's going that way. And somewhere between getting out of the boat and getting to Jesus, he starts to sink. Here's the great point. Where was Jesus? Was Jesus 100 yards from Peter? Was Jesus 100 feet from Peter? Was Jesus right here? We don't know. The Bible doesn't say it. It just says as he approached and went toward Jesus. But in Peter's time of need, because I don't know whether you realize this or not, but if you're going under the water, you better be able to swim. All right? Or hold your breath for an awful long time. And he starts down and he cries out to Jesus, and Jesus reaches his hand out and he rescues Peter. You see, here's the point. It doesn't matter where we are in our journey with Jesus and trying to reach our goal of being with him. When trouble arises, he's right there. You got it? He was right there. It doesn't matter if he was a mile away from Peter. When Peter started down, he was right there. He reached his hand out and got him. I don't know what you're going through. Maybe you're nervous about going to school next week. Maybe there's just some things bugging you. But wherever you're at, working as Jesus, he's just a prayer and a call away. Peter said, Lord, help me. And he was there to help. You see, not only should the disciples have gotten the fact that he was the Son of God, they should have also got the last point that we talked about, was that he cared for people. And he cares for you, and he cares for me. And whenever we're in need, he's always there. Always. All we have to do is call, and he'll reach out and rescue us. I hope you've enjoyed the story. This is one of my favorite stories in the whole Bible because there are so many life applications with it. And I encourage you to get mom and dad and sit down and talk about this story and say, hey, what do you guys see here? What is so really neat to you about the story? You know, it's a wonderful, there's all kinds of things that are in there, all kinds of little hidden things there for us to bring out and talk about. And so I encourage you to do that. Round mom and dad up and say, hey, let's talk about this. And I promise you it'll be a great discussion and you'll learn a lot. I hope to see you here next week, and we'll talk about another miracle with Jesus. See you then.